Welcome to a special session of Global Forum. Today we are going to look at the sociology of fear and the human experience when people are denied their civil liberties, their human rights, and their simple everyday equality in the society. We invited two special guests today. First we have here Captain Yusuf Yee, who was a former Muslim chaplain, also author of a recent book. The book is titled For God and the Country, Faith and Patriotism Under Fire. He is a person who has undergone tremendous ordeal himself, which we will have him narrate to the audience. And we also have Dr. Zahid Bukhari, who is Director of American Muslim Studies at Georgetown University. Welcome to both. The purpose today is just not only to talk about the issues of civil liberties and denial of civil liberties to people in this country, but also communities, the way they are suffering at everyday level. Even when people are not being investigated or interrogated or approached directly, there's a condition of fear or semi-fear that people live under. So we want to look at those traumatic conditions under which American Muslim community is now living. First of all, tell us about your own experience.
Yes, I'm the former U.S. Army Muslim chaplain who served down in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba at the latter part of 2002 and for most of 2003. And in my work there, I was directly interacting with the Muslim prisoners who are held captive there at the infamous Camp Delta. And in my role there, I was able to come to an extreme awareness of the types of abuses that were going on inside this U.S. prison camp. And in my role as a Muslim chaplain working for the U.S. military, reported many of these incidences and concerns from the prisoners themselves to my personal chain of command, after which I was then targeted, put under suspicion, and then subsequently imprisoned myself in a super maximum security prison here in the United States, treated much like an enemy combatant, received treatment much like the prisoners down in Guantanamo, was at times subjected to sensory deprivation, and was actually locked away in a prison that was being used to hold declared enemy combatants who held U.S. citizenship. And so for me, this was a terrible ordeal that I had to endure along with my family. Ultimately, I would be cleared of all criminal charges, and the charges they had initially discussed bringing against me were very heinous. Crimes like espionage, spying, aiding the enemy, and at one point was even threatened with the death penalty by military attorneys. So for me, there was an extraordinary amount of fear, not knowing what could happen, the uncertainty I was facing, and the whole notion that I could have all of my legal and human rights stripped away if I had been declared an enemy combatant.
Now, Mr. Yee, you have gone through tremendous ordeal, and there must be different stages and phases, and times that there were times of uncertainty, I'm guessing, and then time when you look back on these events. What were you feeling when you were in that solitary confinement? What were your feelings at that time?
Well, initially when I was arrested, I thought the whole situation was rather ridiculous. I had been someone who while serving as a chaplain in the U.S. military in the immediate post-9/11 aftermath, was praised at the highest levels of our government, from within the Pentagon and the State Department, for being an avid spokesperson for Muslim issues within the U.S. military. And that praise is what actually landed me the assignment to Guantanamo. So when I got arrested, I thought the whole situation was a huge misunderstanding. I thought it was ridiculous, and the incident or the experience would be cleared up in a matter of days, if not hours. But that didn't happen, and when they transferred me to another prison under sensory deprivation, under armed guards, shackled like prisoners down in Guantanamo are shackled, at the wrist and at the waist and at the ankles, I recognized immediately that this was treatment that was rendered to enemy combatants, because that's what I have observed in my tour down in Guantanamo. And that was when the fear set in, the uncertainty. Again, knowing how prisoners down in Guantanamo were treated, knowing that they had no legal rights, knowing the interpretation of the current administration, on these individuals that they, in fact, don't have any rights. This was fearful. This is where the fright and the fear set in.
Do you think back over those periods, and what's your reflection of those days, those weeks, those months?
Of course, I look back on this daily. I mean, this was something that I will never forget. And when I reflect, I'm amazed that this even happens, could even happen in the United States. I mean, I was born here in this country. I'm a third-generation Chinese American, meaning my parents were also born here. You know, I was given the opportunity to complete my education here in the United States. I went to a premier institution, the United States Military Academy, and then served in the aftermath of the first Gulf War. In fact, all of my brothers and my father also have served in the U.S. military. My younger brother also being a West Point graduate, and my other younger brother being an Army doctor currently serving on active duty. My dad was even drafted during World War II. So we're a very patriotic family. We even celebrated dressed in colonial costumes during the 1976 bicentennial celebration of the United States. So growing up here in this country and living a life here and being what my father called just having an all-American, you know, childhood, paying back by serving in the U.S. military. Never would have thought that this would have happened to me or happened here in the United States.
Dr. Bukhari, what kind of conclusion or impression or lesson can we draw from the story we just heard? A person who is a third-generation American, a patriot, somebody who has made it a passion and a profession to serve this country and its high ideals and morals, raises a question of impropriety as is subjected to this kind of mistreatment solely on the basis of his faith. What reflection does it provide us in terms of claims of our country, in terms of being a secular country, a faith-neutral country? What kind of reflection?
No, when I was hearing that story, I think I was just remembering David Cole, one of his book, and about enemy combatant, I think something like enemy alien. I don't know the exact title, but it's he mentioned all those cases in the American history. Japanese American, there were 110,000, 70,000 were citizens. It's not that they were legal or illegal immigrants. No, they were citizens. And then from Native American and African Americans and all those cases, German Americans and Native American, Japanese, and now Muslim American. He also mentioned a very interesting quote from a Supreme Court judge. He said that this is a very unfortunate or sad state of affairs for America, that during any time of crisis, the civil rights of one group will be confiscated. When that crisis is over, we will apologize as a nation. But then again, crisis will come and we'll do the same thing. So same type of mistakes, American government or American state or society, to some extent, they have been doing it again and again. But again, I think the point is, still in American values or American system, there is a built-in system in this
safety
mechanism. But here's the catch. At this time, after September 11, the argument has been made whether that system of correctness that is built in the American political system will work or not. That is a big question. Means if we see the historical evidence, yes, it is a sad situation. Yes, it is a very unfortunate. But again, it is happening, and then it is being corrected. Although it is bad, because all this advancement in education and all those lessons to all over the world, still means the nation, as a nation, we haven't learned anything. But the other very important question is whether that system of correctness will work this time or not. That is, right now, that is a big question for the American society, American system, American state, and American government.
But Dr. Bukhari, we need to go back and visit the issue of self-correcting mechanism built into the system. Is it self-correcting, or the correction is provided by forces outside of the system, at least outside of the state system? For instance, when African Americans got their right to vote and equality and all that accompanying of rights and liberties, that was not that the state corrected itself. That was because they carried out tremendous effort of different kind leading into civil rights marches and so on and so forth. Let's look at 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson. The U.S. Supreme Court said separate is equal and therefore is constitutional. The same institution, not the same people, but the same institution in 1954 in the Supreme Court decision Brown versus Board of Education said separate is not equal and therefore not constitutional. What had changed was the public opinion. The opinion was not changed by the state, the government, or the press. It was changed by the people who were the victims, who continued to struggle, who continued to stand up for their rights, pay a price. Sometimes the price was their life. Sometimes it was their freedom. Sometimes it was their job, their security. But they continued to pay that price, and the mechanism of correction was supplied from external forces, not internal.
I was not saying that this self-correctness, the system of self-correctness will be initiated by the state. No way. State will be responding, politician will be responding, but it will be initiated by the affected people, those who was victim of that bad.
So Dr. Bukhari, the real lesson to be drawn is twofold. Number one, the system is willing to suspend all the liberties and freedoms afforded to an individual as and when it suits them. You can regain your liberties if you fight for it. There is nothing self-correcting. It is only corrected by the victim, if the victim has the ability to conduct the struggle.
So self-corrective, which I'm saying that, and I think I heard once Al Gore also making that point in one of his speech, that is the capacity of the society, responding, at least giving space for the people to make noise about that, and then also the different institutions responding to that. Well, and then always, historically, in different cases, it is very interesting, the American political science are going zigzag between, I will say, once in my class I made that graph that is 30% below and 30% above. In between this 40%, the American system will work zigzag. If it goes below 30% or upper, in that range of upper 30%, left or right, and then that self-corrective system, correctness system will start working. So it will be initiated by the affected people, by the victim, sometimes by the politicians, sometimes by the media, or maybe they were becoming instrumental in that way. Look at, like for example, Iraq War. Iraq War was, if we say very bluntly, it was a total lie. But still I sometimes wonder that some politicians, they don't like to use the word lie. No, a little bit shy about that. But again, Iraq War or Guantanamo Bay and the Abu Ghraib, media was instrumental. And then right now, as you were making that point, I think the consensus of the society has been broken on that issue. And at this time, this correctness system, self-corrective system was working very quickly.
But Bukhari said the 252 people who were killed as a result of bombing yesterday, what comfort can they or their families draw from the fact that somebody here corrected their own mind and said, oh, we made a mistake in this regard? Because this is only after the fact. As Chomsky says, New York Times tells the truth, but only after the fact. For 1 year, New York Times did not publish the fact that there's a domestic spying going on. James Risen, one of their journalists, had to write a separate book after 1 year. So the time lag here is a crucial factor. But let's come to the practical issue here in terms of the struggles that people do and the lives that they live. For instance, as you know, the federal judge John Gleeson has said, under the immigration law, if you are not a citizen, you can be arrested solely on the basis of your religion, country of origin or ethnicity, held indefinitely without explanation. When you hear it as a citizen, what is your thought on that?
Well, I've seen it firsthand down in Guantanamo. Foreigners being held indefinitely without charges. And the whole controversy, the legal controversy, whether this is in line with the law or the values of this nation.
Exactly. And Zahid, you work in many segments of the Muslim community and other communities. You teach at the university and you deal with all kinds of students. How do you see this betrayal of American ideals and the corpus of universal legal precedents now? You know, there is a notion of international law now. When there is such an obvious violation of the norms of international law, how do you see that affecting the minds of young Muslims that you deal with in the community?
Oh, it's very strange phenomena going on. Means on one side, it's a lot of disappointment and depressing situation means people were thinking those were unthinkable before. Means right now having informer in our community now it's becoming very accepted phenomena. In all those cases, in New York and other states, always there will be one or two Muslim informer. And now they are coming to the court and presenting that, oh yes, that guy was there for 1 year and basically he was collecting all those evidence. Infiltration in the Muslim community is becoming very much misunderstood phenomena.
It is understood or understood and accepted?
I don't know accepted. It is undesirable, but this is there. Okay. This is there. And that phenomena is there. The relief organizations, the ban on all those relief organizations, a millions of dollar amount, zakat amount, was frozen and then melted down because it was spent on legal expenses. That was forced by the government. And then people are starting adjusting. Even deporting people and all those in our surveys, 59% Muslims were responding that they had some type of experience of discrimination in this country. On one hand, yes, this is a phenomenon, definitely. But I think the strange thing is, and then that is the encouraging thing. And look at the Captain Aji example. I think, as he explained, I was hearing first time the whole family history and family story. But then he became, alhamdulillah, I will say alhamdulillah, that he became a star in the Muslim society, in the Muslim community. Wherever he is going, he's become an author, he's become a role model. People love to invite him. So another phenomena of fighting back, another phenomena that standing up. We have to stand up. That also is going on. And it is going on not only in the second generation, even among the first generation. Theoretically, first generation should be very coward. But no, that's not the issue. First generation, even among the first generation, people are standing up and they definitely like to fight back, and they have been fighting back. I would, maybe that's a hunch, that's an estimate that during the last 6-7 years, the community has traveled almost 2 decades of political journey in this land. We learned a lot collectively. So that is the situation going on at this time.
Yeah, to paraphrase Lenin, sometimes nothing happens for decades, and sometimes decades happens in weeks and days. So these are decades of things that happen to the community. Let's talk about this very important issue that you have raised, Dr. Bukhari, about the role of information, which is disturbing under any circumstances, but more so in face of what one thinks of the United States as a society, as a community, as a rule-governed country where people don't look at your religion to determine your humanity, where you are given your equal status as long as you obey the laws and rules and do the right thing. Given all of that, how do you think that the whole infiltration of the community is taking place and what's going on with the community?
Well, if I may say, I think for the first generation immigrant, it's just as coming back to their home. Back home, that is a very normal practice.
Correct.
Mukhabarat in Arab countries, and in our countries, CID and all those, that's very common phenomena. Means all police station Pakistan, they have informer. Several prominent political leaders, they were informer of police stations. So that was a joke in Washington D.C. also, that sometimes the American some policymakers have Muslims are here and they would like to make America an Islamic state. And after September 11, what they did, especially Department of Justice, Muslims could not make America Islamic state, but Department of Justice made America as the Arab state. All those mukhabarat and informer and intelligence and no due course, no court, no law. So whatever is going on in Arab and Muslim countries, not every country, but that is the same thing is going on here.
But Dr. Bukhari, humor is some ways a means of dealing with things that are difficult, unpleasant, and unpalatable. So what we are saying is that there is an unfair treatment of the Muslim Arab community in this country. Their fabric of their community is being penetrated through informers. Now I understand at least 4 types of informers are being implanted. One are simply to collect information. Second, and that pattern is very obvious, are people who are actually agent provocateurs, who are there to provoke people to say or do unwise things. That happened in Lodi, California, that happened in New York, that happened in Ohio, that happened in Michigan, that happened in Florida. So we now see a pattern of people, both Muslims by birth and converted individuals, normally between the ages of 30 to 45, who are infiltrated into the communities. They normally approach younger people, provoke them to say mostly things that are unwise, and trap them by taping them, and that is seen as sufficient evidence to put somebody behind bars for 30 years, as happened in New York. Third, we see an informer who is agent of influence, who is there to change the opinion of the community in certain direction. And fourth, there are people who are lookers, who are there to see who else can be recruited to do the job. So given such comprehensive penetration of the community, is that a fair treatment under the law of a community? Is America treating its Muslim citizens at par with other citizens?
Of course, no. But the point I was making, that we are in that period of Japanese American were put into physical internment camp. We are in that conceptual period of internment.
Virtual internment.
Or virtual internment. Yes. So it's not fair, definitely. But the question is, I think that it is not fair, but the community is not waiting that when that period will be over, then they will start fighting back. The community has started immediately fighting back. So our leadership and our community, I think they are very vigilant, to some extent. And they are fighting back. So, but that phenomena is very much there. Not only that, with the informal word maybe we can use in different way. Even our organizations and Islamic centers, sometimes very unhealthy competition is going on. Unfortunate. Anybody is getting invitation, they like to monopolize that invitation, not sharing with others. And they are feeling that no, they have some acceptable status. That's unfortunate, but that is going on also.
Yes, very much the internal and external factor. But let's talk about the state a little more. Let's look at the RAND Corporation, which is a semi-official status. It was a think tank within the U.S. Air Force, and it was externalized to make it more objective and neutral and disinterested. They have come out with a number of reports about Muslims. Their first report, all 527 pages, talked about Muslims, dividing them into 5 categories of fundamentalists, traditionalists, secularists, secular, modern, and Sufis, and saying certain Muslims categories are better than others. What Mahmoud Mamdani has captured in the title of his book, Good Muslims, Bad Muslims. Shouldn't the role of a state to look at a community and use its tremendous powers to reorganize the internal structure of a religious community?
No, historically, I'm not sure whether in America it was. In Europe, to some extent, states are doing that. They are doing that probably not the restructuring of the community, but at least imposing a leadership structure on the community. In Europe, the state is very much involved. In America, it's a different way of working. I think state probably, RAND Corporation still is not, we cannot say 100% state. Means in the think tanks type thing, just they have intelligence think tanks or Air Force think tanks. maybe it's a networking over there. There are several think tanks working on Muslims. When the RAND Corporation report came, simultaneously CSIS, Center for Strategic International Studies, their report also came with the Muslim world. And if you, very interesting phenomenon. CSIS also issued two reports. Two sections of CSIS issued two reports dealing with the Muslim world. One is, according to my point of view, is very negative about the Muslim community and the Muslim world, and other one is very positive. There are several other think tanks where USIP was established by the Congress. They are working. Woodrow Wilson established by the Congress. East-West Institute in Hawaii established by the Congress. Some other institutes also, they are working with the Muslim community. And at least they are claiming positive, and they like to invite everybody. But the RAND Corporation is totally going into a different direction. So all this struggle is also going on. I think, and we should be intelligent enough, and we are, that means what is their mindset, how they like to do that, and how the Muslim community should respond.
Well, again, I'll ask you a very basic question, and maybe you'll jump in, Mr. Yi. And the question I'm asking is, should state, in any democratic system, any conceivably democratic setup, target a single group within its own framework, its own population, and treat it differently than others, and mobilize the large and strong arm of state, its intelligence agencies, its coercive and cooperative wings, and try to coalesce them in a different direction? Is that a fair treatment? Is that democratic rule?
No, of course, definitely not. But I think there's a bigger significance here. What we've seen is a broad net being cast over a particular group. In this case, it's the Muslim community. And it's done under the reasoning that it's for national security. But by casting this net over this particular community, is that in actuality making the nation safer? I would argue, no, it's not. And I would argue, from my experience working in the military and working alongside some of these military intelligence personnel, that there is no shortcut to good intelligence gathering and national security. And in this way, when our particular community, our particular religious group is targeted and under this cloud of suspicion, that it in fact does not make us safer. And this actually, from an international relations perspective, goes against the doctrine that a developed nation can both increase national security and protections of civil liberties at the same time, contrary to those developed nations which are more challenged, and usually one is sacrificed for the other. Now, our country, the United States, of course, arguably is a developed country, a very developed country, and many in this country would argue perhaps it's the most developed country. So there should be no question that our nation can increase our national security as well as the protections of civil rights and civil liberties, but as we've seen in 9/11, that's not the case. We've seen, of course, a deterioration and an eroding of civil liberties in this country under the guise that it's necessary for protection of our country.
Now, given the fact that it's neither morally acceptable nor practically useful, does it lead us to feel that this is the most developed country in the world? And despite being the most developed, it's failing, it is because certain segments in this country did not allow certain kind of questions to be asked. After September 11, the whole focus was on what happened, but nobody was allowed to ask the question why it happened. And not being able to ask the why question, we were not able to find long-term, lasting and abiding solutions to the problem. So either that we are failing because there's a methodological explanation for the failure, because America has not allowed itself to look at the root cause of the problem. Would that be the reason?
Perhaps, but surely in my view, when we look at what happened on 9/11, the citizens of this country rely on intelligence agencies to protect us, to protect our country, and their role is to ensure that something like this doesn't happen. And when we see the response to 9/11 being that a certain community is targeted because they feel that this will better protect us. This clearly, in my view, is an intelligence failure. And that happened clearly in my case, where because I was a serving Muslim chaplain and interacting with the Muslim prisoners, I was then suspected of colluding with the prisoners and accused of these heinous crimes. This was a clear intelligence failure. It was the intelligence agencies, the FBI, the military intelligence personnel who was behind this, and it was a complete failure. And that does tremendous harm to the reputation of these agencies, the reputation of military law, and the institutions and values which is supposed to make our country a free and just society.
I still wonder what happens from September 11 up till today. Whether it is a continuity of that historical mishap in the American society when at the time of emergency, or time of war, civil rights of certain group has been confiscated, as the Supreme Court judge mentioned, David Cole mentioned that, or it is more than that. Because sometimes it looks like that it is a failure of, it's a civilizational failure. Because the whole thing has been built around a lie or some other planning. Means the Iraq war, and then the whole issue of not debating the reason, whole issue of claiming that the policy or American policies does not have any connection with any reaction from certain Muslim groups, and they should be separate. And whole notion of Islam has to be reformed, Muslims have to be reformed, and then presenting Iraq right now, this issue of Shia-Sunni issues, it's just not talking about occupation, not talking about why they built up and making, I heard about shifting stands, but now shifting stands on Iraq are going on. So it's the issue of that historical continuity of mishaps in American society, or it's more than that, it's civilizational failure. That is, I think I wonder maybe more discussion is needed on that issue. What is going on right now? Because I feel in 21st century, still as an American society, American citizen, we have not learned from history. And the overall image of America has been trashed in all over the world. It never happened before. Means probably the time of crisis, America image was not as bad as we have right now. Maybe it's due to globalization and some other factor also. But at this time, American image, American president image is at the lowest point.
And I think what you have said has been captured and conveyed by Zbigniew Brzezinski when he was asked on Jim Lehrer showed if he thinks there's going to be any redeeming feature of this Iraqi fiasco. He said no, because this is a colonial experiment in a post-colonial era. So the whole Bush administration experiment was out of sync with history in the sense that it was trying something from a bygone era in a present moment that was simply not suitable for that. So that whole notion of trying a colonial experiment, colonizing a country in a post-colonial era, was, I think, very clearly saying what you just tried to say.
But I'll say more than that with the previous colonial experiment, when they went bad, ultimately, those colonial power become very third-grade power. Rather, it is only the Bush presidency or the whole American empire. Means what would be the impact of that? If the colonial failure in the post-colonial era will be ultimately only the failure for the Bush presidency, or for the American.
But I think that there are two people who reflected on that, is Noam Chomsky and Zbigniew Brzezinski, not very much similar thinkers, but coming to the same conclusion. They believe there is one last chance, the second chance, the last time the book will come out. And the last chance is to correct yourself and provide a democratic leadership, a humane leadership to the world, or you are going to be condemned to the same dustbin of history as other colonial powers.
But that's the point I was saying, that unfortunately right now, even for example, Democrats come to power, the overall state structure, as Eisenhower said, the military-industrial complex, or as John Perkins said, the corporatocracy, is so much, their impact is so abundant here. I'm afraid that whether any change leadership will change any make any meaningful
impact. Yes.
Yeah.
You see, again, the structure or the whole may be too great, but it is not going to slow down or sidestep historical patterns and consequences. The greater the hold, the greater the likelihood of failure, because they are unable to change, and they are unlikely to allow anybody else to help them change. So sometimes having greater power is actually a greater recipe for disaster. Because if you are less powerful, other people can stop you from self-destruction. If you are too powerful, then nobody can stop you from self-destruction. So this corporatocracy may be too powerful, but their power may be the source of their own destruction. Because not only they are not going to change their mind, nobody else is in a position to help them change. And I think that's what both Chomsky and Brzezinski in their own style with their own ideological approaches are saying the same thing. Well, it has been a discussion where we have talked about a large number of issues, starting from the issue of community, its feeling of despair, anguish, anxiety, young people feeling frustrated, seeing betrayal of American goals and ideals, individual lives put at risk. But we have also talked about how the state is selectively using its apparatuses, its long and strong arms to penetrate the Muslim community, infiltrate, provoke, humiliate, misdirect, divide, confuse, and cause conflict. But we also looked at the history of struggles. People stand up, fight back, and protect their rights, and Muslims are doing the same thing. And we also talked about the larger pattern of history as captured by Dr. Bukhari, echoed by other people, that this is a choice between either correcting yourself and being consistent with the 21st century, or continuing the patterns of European colonialism and being condemned to the dustbin of history. We will continue this discussion in another session. Thank you very much.